Okay, great. Well, first, thanks for spending your Wednesday evening with us. Excited to have you. Thanks to everyone who's live streaming on Twitch, and then also shout out to the Pinpoint dev team back in Seattle and Irvine. So, as Shashank mentioned, my name is Zach Barbitta, and I'm a senior product manager on the Amazon Pinpoint service. So while we get the slides back up, quick question. For those in the room, who has heard of Amazon Pinpoint? Okay. Great, a few folks. That's good, because over the next 15 minutes, that means that I can educate a lot of folks about the service, and then as well as ensure that you leave here today with something of value. But I can't do that if I don't have my slides. There we go. Okay, great. So Amazon Pinpoint, it's Amazon's customer engagement service. And so what do I mean by that? Well, we spend a tremendous amount of time at Amazon thinking about our customers, both on AWS as well as on Amazon on the retail side. And so what we've done over the years is we've tried to productize and externalize some of the things that Amazon's thought about is that it relates to customer engagement. Right? How can we give you, developers, and the teams you work with, the product managers, the growth teams, the marketing teams, give you the power that you want and to create really unique customer experiences. So Pinpoint is really broken into 5 major pillars. And today we're going to spend about 15 minutes, 5 baselining on what those pillars are, 5 minutes on talking about what's new, and then 5 minutes going into an actual demo. Because I think actually seeing Pinpoint in action, seeing the console, is really the most exciting thing. So first, user management. So what do I mean by that? Well, for the last decade, if not more, we've been told collect data, right? Data is where there's insights, where there's power. And Amazon Pinpoint wants to make that data, that insight, more accessible to more people within your organizations. So for those of you that are engineers or developers in the room, which I assume is the majority, right, you're probably often asked by your colleagues, your peers, your teams that you work with, can you help me pull this data? Or can you help me look and find this insight? Like, where is the value? So Amazon Pinpoint presents that in a way for your non-technical teams to really understand. So it's a lightweight CDP, customer data platform. The second is audience management. So since Amazon Pinpoint is focused on customer engagement and creating these really rich scenarios, you really have to understand who is your audience. What is the composition? What are the demographics? What are their attributes? So once you build this user profile, that feeds right into the audience management capabilities. So giving your, again, non-technical and technical teams the insights into specific cohorts. So when we go into the demo, I'll show you how we visualize some of these attributes. And then the third component, to no surprise, right, is now that you've got great profiles in Pinpoint, now that you understand your unique cohorts, you want to create these engagement scenarios. So how do you target them? How do you slice and dice your audience to get to what we're at, not out today, but what we hope to aspire to be, which is the segment of one, which every notification, every advertisement, every interaction that we all have with brands should be 100% customized for you. Right? I think we can all relate that we've received an email and it said hello, and then it's tried to have a message variable and they got it wrong. Well, the second you saw that, you know that notification wasn't personalized or relevant. And that's a negative experience for your customers. So we provide the targeting tools to make it easier for your teams across the organization to leverage. Fourth is channels. And when we say channels, we talk about the medium in which you engage with your customers. So traditionally, right, we know email, SMS, push. There's so many other channels to engage. And so we're thinking about in 10, 15, 20 years, what does interaction look like when you're in a virtual world or an augmented world? So when we say channels today, and we'll show you, it's your traditional user engagement channels, but it's also things like emergent social channels. So I'm not sure if folks have heard the new social platform TikTok, right? If your marketing or growth team suddenly want to engage with users on TikTok, you need a managed service to help you do that quickly. And that's what Pinpoint aspires to do. Fifth is insights. So if you think about this sort of as a positive feedback loop, as a circle of engagement, the analytics that your users generate from your app, web and mobile, as well as your messaging, that feeds right back into your user management. So it feeds right back into your profile. And so the idea here is, since this is one managed solution for all your engagement, when you get those events back, those direct and indirect actions, that's just enriching the profiles, which enriches the targeting, which then enriches the engagement. So that's what Amazon Pinpoint is in broad strokes over the 5 pillars. So what's next? What gets us really excited? So one thing is event triggers. And this might sound simplistic, but event triggers is really powerful because it gets us closer to that segment of one that I was mentioning earlier. So what event triggers does is any event that you send to Pinpoint, Pinpoint can evaluate it. So think of it as building a watcher for those events. And depending on what you define in the console, and we'll show this in the demo, we can then send a message immediately back to that user. So I always give the example, if let's say you're buying peanut butter online for whatever reason. If the second you add peanut butter to your cart, you get a notification that says, "Would you like jelly?" That could be a good customer experience. I'm not saying it is, but it sounds logical that cross-sell or upsell at scale in real time is very powerful. I think another use case is the second that your users touch the request password or reset password button, that should trigger a workflow. And this doesn't have to be just direct actions, right? It could be indirect. It could be your users reaching a certain milestone in a gaming application or completing a certain number of purchases. And it's not just a static event. It can be the attributes and metrics on an event. So what I mean by that is, let's say you run an e-commerce site and you want to send a certain notification when someone spends $1,000. Well, you can define that through the console, and then that specific notification will be sent to only users who trigger that event. Next is Amazon Pinpoint Voice. And so voice is exciting, and it's often overlooked. But voice is exciting because there's billions of people that still rely on voice as the main medium for communication. So when I do these presentations and I talk about voice, I sort of see some people say, "Yeah, voice is kind of dead to me. We're not interested." So I always kind of give this example, which I think is extremely relevant. So let's say you're a financial services company, and you enable users to send money back and forth from each other. And one user sends a large volume to another, a large monetary value. Well, as a financial service institution, you might want to validate that transaction. So your first idea might say, let's send them a text message, an SMS, and ask them to say, 1, to confirm, or 2, no, this is fraud. So that's a typical pattern, right? We've seen it deploy, we've probably all experienced that. But what happens if you don't hear back from that user in 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Well, you could have a failover to voice, so you can call them to validate. So I think it's just one use case of where we see voice being used in a common customer engagement scenario. Next is a new feature called Deliverability Dashboard. And for those that work with email, support teams that use email, right? Everyone in this room's organization uses email in some capacity. This feature is really powerful because it helps you understand what exactly is happening to the messages that you're sending. So, right, everyone focuses on the KPIs, the open rates, the click rates, the conversions, right? That's sort of standard marketing 101. But what happens if that email never gets to the inbox? So Deliverability Dashboard helps you understand and provides those insights from the world's largest ISPs. So it helps you understand your IP reputation, your spam rate. You can even do predictive email testing so you can get a sense for what emails are going to land in what inboxes. So a powerful feature for anyone that really leverages email. So I put this slide up because at AWS, we have 165 services. And that means there's 165 teams that are building features for you all, right? Our roadmap is dictated by what customers need. That also means that there's a tremendous amount of new things shipping, new things to learn. And so with Pinpoint, what we try to do is abstract away some of those capabilities so your teams can move quicker. And what I mean by that is, I talked about all the events being ingested by Pinpoint. Let's say you want to pipe those to S3 just to store them. But we have native integration with Kinesis so that you can simply drop your Kinesis ARN, and then every event will just be written to that destination. I think another good example is a service that was announced at reInvent last year, Amazon Personalize, right? They aspire to provide ML-based recommendation and personalization. So often customers tell me, okay, I understand what Pinpoint does, but I want my notifications, my engagement to be smarter. I want to use something like a Personalize or a SageMaker. And so we enable that through lightweight solutions with other AWS services so you can get up to speed faster. So that, I'm going to jump into the demo to show you what Amazon Pinpoint looks like. Okay, great. So what I have here is a dummy account, so this is fictitious data. But in this scenario, let's assume we're Amazon Restaurants. And for those of you not familiar with Amazon Restaurants, it's a food delivery company. So what Amazon Restaurants, what their teams might be interested in knowing is the demographics and composition of their user base. So after they configure their web and mobile clients with the AWS SDKs, Pinpoint automatically surfaces some of these insights. So if you can see on my screen, at the top we have what we call standard attributes. So this is just about sort of who is coming to you and using your applications. What's the platform, device model, make, location? And this is important, right? Let's say 90% of your users are Android users. Well, you should probably think about your Android roadmap versus your iOS. But I think what's really exciting is the custom attributes. So these are attributes that you define, that you and your teams think about, you want to capture on your clients and then send to Pinpoint. And what's interesting here is this is where you make Pinpoint yours. So, right, Pinpoint's an AWS service. It has the flexibility that you'd expect. So in this demo account, we've configured it so we can understand what people's favorite foods are, what their favorite interests are, their restaurants, whether they're a Prime member or Whole Foods member, right? This is all fictitious, but this is the idea. This is the power of what Pinpoint can provide. Next, I want to go over to events. So I mentioned event triggers and setting up notifications based on certain events. So a common pattern that we see across customers is digging into the granularity of the events. So not only do they want to know the purchase event, but they want to know the details of that event, so the attributes and the metrics. So in the 3 clicks over the last 10 seconds, what I essentially did was ask Pinpoint to query over the last 30 days the data store for purchase events where the dish equaled popcorn. And again, like, why do we care about this? Why is it exciting? And that's because a lot of your teams, as you probably know, are writing SQL queries to do this, or they're asking you or working with their BI team. So we want to surface this as easily as possible. And I should have called out before I started this that everything you see in the console is available through the REST APIs. So the next workflow I'll go through is setting up a campaign. So in a campaign, we'll just call this test. I want to create a new segment. So if you remember the beginning slide, I talked about user profiles and audience management. So that's really what we're showcasing here. So I want to create a new segment for whatever campaign I'm setting up. So let's say it's pepperoni pizza lovers in the US. Me too, I'm in here. So you just look and define these filters based on those user profiles that you've already set up. So I would go to favorite food, I would search for pizza, and there's pepperoni pizza. And then let's say I want to add additional filters. I want to constrain this Boolean operator. I just can flip this to and, add additional filters, and let's say typical order, and here's the dollar value. So let's say they order gourmet pizza. So there's 8 people. So again, the sort of the theme, if you haven't teased it out yet, is this is meant to be very easy, right? This is meant to be something that your teams across your organization can use. And discard this. And the last thing I want to show is event triggers. So event triggers, if you recall from a few slides, is triggering a notification based off of a certain event. So I have a pre-existing segment that I created prior to this called Mexican Food Enthusiasts. So as I go through this, let's say a push notification and just say you're a top user, enjoy this gift. And then of course you can have your message variables here. So that's customized for each individual user. And what we're doing is just pulling that attribute value off to the endpoint profile. Here's a free $10. Whatever it might be. But here's where I define the events that I actually want to send this notification. So I want to send this to folks who create a purchase event where the dish is tacos and the metric, so the item price, is greater than $100. So again, the idea here is this event is a high value action, an HVA, we call it, for, in this case, Amazon restaurants. So they've set up a campaign where only when this event comes in and is evaluated does the notification sent out. So with that, that was a quick 15-minute primer on Amazon Pinpoint, what it is, what's new, and then the actual demo itself. I believe I'm turning it over to Shashank again, but I can take any questions for the next 2 minutes. I think we have 1 minute left. There's a question over there.
So can you dive into specific user profiles and understand what that an individual user did?
Yeah, so the question was, can you dive into specific end user profiles and understand what they did? So the short answer is yes. So all the data that happens is streamed back to Pinpoint. And you can export that with Kinesis to whatever destination and then do any sort of analysis that you want post that. In the console itself, so right here, there's no way to go to an individual user profile like to double click into today. But good feedback, we hear that often.
Can you do anything with a user profile quality, like good quality, if they sign up for this event twice under two different emails, you can kind of identify duplicate?
Yeah, so we do duplicate endpoint addresses upon campaign execution. And so just for a little bit more color there, everyone in this room would be sort of defined as a user in the Pinpoint vernacular. And users have different endpoints. So an endpoint could be an email address, a phone number, a Facebook handle, a Twitter ID, your push notification device token. And so if you signed up 2 user profiles with the same endpoint address and you were in that segment, we would dedupe that upon send. I think one up front. Yeah.
Can you have a trigger depend on more than one event? Can you have like a delay on when you want that notification to go out?
Yeah, good question. It was, can you have multiple events and can you have delays? No, not today. Correct. Good feedback. Yep.
Are those segments only you identify and upload, or is it from other third-party sources too?
It's only you. So this is your customers. You can create them via the SDKs that you instrument your clients with, so then Pinpoint will dynamically manage those. Or a lot of customers, they have their user lists in a third-party system or in an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can just import that CSV or JSON in through the console or programmatically. Yeah, I see 3. I'll start here, I'll work back.
So as detailed as possible, how would it find whether or not a user was a Whole Foods member or not?
So good question. It was, how does it know if it's a Whole Foods member or not? In this example, that would be an attribute that the application receives from the user as they go through the onboarding flow. So in this example, if I was Amazon Restaurants, I would have to explicitly ask that customer, are you a Whole Foods member, yes or no? So they'd be like a preference center. Similarly to how you define like what categories you want to receive notifications from.
So it wouldn't like set off a trigger when the user subscribes to the service to just check a database to see if they're that account's in Whole Foods or not.
So you can configure it like with your application. You could configure it to check to see and create that mapping. In this example, though, I guess the point I want to make sure that it's clear is like there's no attachment to first-party data that we have on users' profiles. It's all data you provide us. Yep.
So I see this is basically makes kind of those sandwiches, kind of combine those two.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering for users that are not subscribed or haven't been giving their email or whatever, do you guys like drop a kind of token to identify those unauthenticated users, like those visitors?
We don't. So it has to be a known user that you provide us for that engagement.
Okay. Can that somehow connect with, let's say, Cognito's kind of? Okay.
Again.
Thank you.
And we're out of time. I'll be here after for the next 30 minutes, hour, so thank you all very much.